It is Thursday, December 4th, 2025. And as I'm looking at this, it looks like Europeans are getting the memo and they're realizing that it's not going to work well for them if the Trump administration and Russia continue to collude. So they're starting to band together in a meaningful way. Let's start here. The Europeans are starting to band together in a meaningful way in order to thwart whatever the Trump administration might do. Special Envoy Witkoff will meet with the head of Ukraine's delegation, National Security and Defense Council Secretary Umerov, on December 4th. That's today in Miami. So it looks like Umerov just didn't go back yet. He's here after the previous negotiations. Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, will also take part in the talks, according to the Associated Press. Now, the U.S. peace plan under discussion reportedly has 4 parts, according to the New York Times. One is dealing with Ukraine's sovereignty, including limits on the peacetime army and missile range. I don't know why the limits are on the Ukrainian peacetime army and missile range rather than on what the Russian limits should be. Territorial issues are a second big thing, and there's no resolution there. Economic cooperation. This is what Russia is trying to draw the United States into giving concessions with: economic cooperations, and then European security. Now, this European security piece has been not really including the Europeans. And so the Europeans are getting a little nervous, as rightly they should be, and they're starting to really kind of come together, circle the wagons, recognizing that there's going to be some real problems if they don't. This is what Trump just said about the last little bit of negotiations.
Jared Kushner were there last night with Vladimir Putin. Can you give us an update about those talks? It sounds from what the Kremlin is saying that they're not going to compromise. Can you tell us what you've...
I don't know what the Kremlin's doing.
Okay, I don't know what the Kremlin's doing. That's fair. He really doesn't know what the Kremlin's doing. That's the most truthful thing I've heard in a long time.
Tell you that they had a reasonably good meeting with President Putin. We're going to find out. It's a war that should have never been started.
And he goes on and on.
President, we had a rigged election.
It would never have happened if I was in charge.
If I were president, that war would have never happened. It's a terrible thing. But I thought they had a very good meeting yesterday with President Putin.
What does very good mean? That's really the trick here. What do you mean by very good meeting? Okay, so there's deep distrust in Washington's handling of the peace deal. This is Der Spiegel. EU leaders urge Zelensky to be very careful in the coming days as great danger was looming. And again, they're circling the wagons. Europe fears that the U.S. may betray Ukraine and force a capitulation. German outlet Der Spiegel has published details from closed phone call that Volodymyr Zelensky held on Monday with EU leaders. Participants in the call believe the U.S. might reach a deal with Russia without Ukraine's involvement and effectively impose territorial concessions. So, while some things are going well, like this is the Danes are getting it. They're working with the Ukrainians, setting up the first weapons manufacturer that will operate in a NATO country, and that's from Ukraine. The plant will be located near the Strup Air Base, positioning that provides additional protection and logistical advantages. The Danish industry minister has marked the start of the construction with a symbolic groundbreaking. So while that's happening, the Europeans are saying, wait a minute, we got to be really careful. Finland's President Stubb says he's frustrated after seeing the original peace plan and warns that a just peace in Ukraine is unlikely. Let me say that again. He warns that a just peace in Ukraine is unlikely. Even if a ceasefire happens, it may end up as a compromise, not full justice. Europe must be ready for that reality. So it's an ominous warning. And then we see this in reference to the recent talks in Moscow. German foreign policy expert makes the following statements, quote, "The current talks between the U.S. and Russia are nothing but a sham negotiations that will take place over our heads. Yet Europe is not powerless. We must now consistently employ our instruments, release Russian assets, halt the Shadow Fleet in the Baltic, take over air defense for Western Ukraine, and finally deliver Taurus missiles to neutralize more military targets even inside Russia. Anyone who fears escalation fails to recognize that Putin is already waging this war against us through sabotage and hybrid attacks. We have squandered months waiting on the U.S. That's exactly right. They have squandered months waiting on the U.S., which is now withdrawing from its protective role. That's right. The U.S. has gone from being a backer of Ukraine to I'm going to be a referee between you two. That's bad. You actually want the U.S. to be backing, not trying to be a referee. And a referee that seems to be in Putin's corner, maybe bribed by Putin in some ways or incentivized by these deals. We have squandered months waiting on the U.S. It's up to Europeans. If only if we take our security into our own hands and confront Putin with maximum resolve and strength, can we force him to back down. Any hesitation or appeasement or one-sided pressure on the attacked Ukraine will only broaden the war. I think that's spot-on analysis. Now, what were Macron and Merz saying? Macron immersed in a confidential conference with Zelensky and several other top European politicians, issued stark warnings that the U.S. could betray Ukraine and Europe. Quote, there is a possibility that the U.S. will betray Ukraine on the issue of territory without clarity regarding security guarantees, Macron said, according to Spiegel. Merz said that Zelensky must be, quote, extremely careful in the coming days, unquote. And, quote, they're playing games, both with you and with us. So the Europeans understand. They get it now. They're like, uh-oh, we got to really do something here. Meanwhile, Putin saying that Russia is ready to fight until the last Ukrainian dies. That's right. And here, Ukraine's peace plan has only led to Putin losing his fear of Trump. Whatever fear he might have had of what Trump might do to him, it doesn't seem like that's there anymore. Putin no longer fears Trump. Talks widened the rift between Europe and Washington, delighting Moscow. That is the net result of what just took place over the last week, is that there's a bigger split between Europe and the United States than there's ever been. Okay, United Nations Security General Antonio Guterres, in an interview with Reuters, I'm pointing this out for one line. I think it's important, he says, in relation to Ukraine at the present moment, not to forget the principles. First, it was Russia that invaded Ukraine, not the other way around. So why are we limiting Ukraine's army as opposed to limiting Russia's army? Like, what are we doing? And second, and this is what I want to point out, when we look at the conflict, the solution of the conflict should be abide by international law. Yeah, it's Russia that violated international law here because they wanted to cross over the borders and do what they did to Ukraine. That's what we need to be focused on. Some voices are saying the right thing, like Newt Gingrich, but he's out of power. He's been out of power since the 90s. He's the former Speaker of the House in the United States. With the insulting attitude Putin continues to have about demanding Ukraine's surrender instead of a truce, the only realistic strategy is for the United States and its European allies to vastly expand military aid to Ukraine and approve Ukrainian deep strikes inside Russia to raise the cost of war to Putin until he agrees to a truce. That's the right strategy. We're pursuing strategies that are all wrong. Yesterday, I told you about how Italy was pulling out of the Pearl Arms program. Well, Australia and New Zealand are joining NATO's Pearl Arms program to buy U.S.-made weapons for Ukraine, committing together $63 million and $8.7 million for weapons to and aid to Ukraine, according to Secretary General Mark Rutte. Okay, well, that's positive. Drawing a red line. Now let's switch to another topic. Red line. Bipartisan fury boils over as the U.S. Senate confronts Russian abduction of Ukrainian children. Now, you got to understand, in the American mindset or what's going on in the United States, there's not maybe some support for Ukraine, but there is animosity toward Russia simultaneously, even from the quarters where there's not support for Ukraine. And this is one of those places. So here's Michael McCaul. Michael McCaul is the chairman emeritus of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and chairman emeritus of the House Committee on Homeland Security. He's no slouch. Listen to this.
The I've talked to believes the number's higher, much higher than that. They are also indoctrinating and militarizing Ukrainian children in the occupied territories, possibly up to 1 million. According to the video, Russia has allocated $7 billion in its 26-28 budget for a national project titled Youth and Children, essentially militarized youth organizations. The ambassador told me again that 1 million children live in the occupied territories, vulnerable to brainwashing and abuse, and more than 43,000 have already enrolled in Russia's paramilitary youth program. So
yeah, they're using Ukrainian children to train as Russian soldiers for the next coming wave of Russian soldiers. That's what that amounts to.
These children's parents have been threatened and giving up their kids. They're shipped to Russia, stripped of their identities, tortured, forced to memorize propaganda, and told their country and their own families are the enemy. Finally, many of them are sent to the front lines of the Russian war itself. Imagine a child age 16 being sent to the front lines to fight against their own homeland. And Mr. Chairman, in the documentary Children in the Fire, I'd recommend everybody watch this. They show a child in a prison where adults use electrodes to shock.
Yeah, I'm not going to finish the rest of that. You can use your imagination here. Let's go on to this. Important among Ukrainian children abducted by Russia. Some are being forcibly transferred to North Korea and placed in military camps. Katerina Rashivka from the Regional Center for Human Rights is talking about this, attaching the soundbite from her statement. Here's her talking about this.
My organization documented 165 re-education camps where Ukrainian children are militarized and Russified. These camps exist in occupied territories in Russia, in Belarus, and in North Korea. In this photo, you can see 12-year-old Misha from the occupied Donetsk region. And in this one, 16-year-old Lisa from occupied Simferopol. They were sent to the Sondovon camp in the North Korea, 9,000 kilometers from home. In this camp, children were taught to destroy Japanese militaries and met Korean veterans who in 1968 attacked the United States ship Pueblo, killing and wounding 9 American soldiers. Russification and militarization cause severe trauma and violate children's dignity.
It does. I mean, this is the definition of genocide when you take children from their parents or try to brainwash them into being something other than where they are. Here's Maxim Masimov, head of Bring Kids Back UA, providing evidence of Russia's ongoing genocide. And that's what this is by definition.
Finally, when identity is weakened, militarization begins. Children enter state-run programs where they train with drones, practice assault drills, and absorb wartime ideology. By 18, that imposed citizenship becomes the basis for conscription, to send them to fight the country they were taken from. This is the arc of Russia's design: isolate, reprogram, deploy. A 16-year-old Veronika once told me that she was punished for speaking Ukrainian and that she was repeatedly told that her mother has abandoned her and was not coming for her. A lie meant to break her connection to home. And this is exactly why Bring Kids Back UA exists. Not only to bring the kids back, but to reverse what Russia tried to do and keep children from being lost twice, first to Russia and then to trauma.
It almost hurts my head to think how badly we're bungling it diplomatically while this is happening simultaneously. Okay, just a couple other things here. Ukraine expects U.S. To increase pressure on Russia to recognize it as a state sponsor of tea, says the Ukrainian ambassador, Stefanishina. We have strong bipartisan support and assistance. We have just held a Senate hearing on the abducted Ukrainian children, at which I and my colleagues from various sectors in Ukraine have testified. And so that's positive that this is going on right now. Meanwhile, the UN General Assembly has adopted a resolution demanding Russia immediately and unconditionally return all Ukrainian children who have been forcibly transferred or deported since the start of the war. The document was supported by 91 countries, and that sounds great until you realize 69 member states of the UN General Assembly did not. They didn't vote that way. 69 countries around the world. There's like 180 countries. 69 did not vote to return kidnapped Ukrainian children, despite how despicable, how deplorable, how genocidal this actually is. Using the same gruesome tactics practiced in Syria, Putin this is Joe Wilson who posted this. War criminal Putin carpet bombs Ukrainian territory Russia illegally occupies, turning cities and suburbs into flaming rubble while remaining residents and rescue workers. Putin's thugs kidnaps children of all ages, often through filtration camps, trafficking them to Russia for re-education and forced adoption. Stolen children as young as infants are advertised in catalogs with descriptions such as quiet, obedient, and subdued. Children who witnessed the murder of their parents or were ripped from their arms and are brainwashed, and they're told they're not wanted or loved and that Ukraine does not exist. There's sexual abuse, there's tea, there's forced labor, children this is widely documented. It's genocide, and that is actually what it is. A couple last things and we'll be done. Putin right now is in India making deals about military contracts like S-400 or Su-57 jets or a $2 billion submarine, and they're working on trade issues like dealing with oil and that sort of thing. Now, Macron was in China. He's talking to President Xi, trying to get Xi some headway there. I don't know that anything will come of that, but that's where we are. That wraps up all the news. All right, that was a lot to get through, my friends. By the way, if you want to listen rather than watch, you can listen on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Podbean, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Player FM, Listen Notes, Podchaser, Boomplay. If you want to listen, if you listen to podcasts, just look up Professor Gerdes Explain in podcasts and you'll find me. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Thank you for the time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. Thank you for being the kind of person who cares about Ukraine.